Welcome to this session entitled Community Engagement and Social Marketing, Changing Behaviors in Your Watershed. I am Jack Wilbur, your presenter. A little bit more about me. I am the co-owner of Social Marketing Consultants in Salt Lake City, along with my wife, Carrie Cutler. We do the public information and education consulting for the Salt Lake County Stormwater Coalition. I also served in state government for 30 years with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and I co-chaired an EPA outreach committee for many, many years. Within that time, I've conducted watershed outreach and social marketing, behavior change, training, and implementation campaigns throughout the country. And one of the things that I did many years ago in 2006 was put together a social marketing guidebook for the state and EPA called Getting Your Feet Wet with Social Marketing. That is available online, and I would highly recommend you looking that up. So let's talk a little bit about the basics of behavior change, both personal and promoted change. I think in order to promote change in others, you need to understand a little bit about what it takes to change yourself. So let's talk about that for a minute. Have you ever made a sustained lifestyle change? If so, what was it you changed? Why did you make that change? And what was the tipping point? In other words, there's almost always a time where you say, you know what, I've had enough. I need to start exercising for whatever reason. I need to eat better. And whatever that reason is, you get to a point where you say, I can't continue the way I've been doing it. That's the tipping point. So if you look at the stages of change model that was developed in the 1980s, it starts with pre-contemplation. And pre-contemplation, it may be on your radar, you may have heard of something, but you haven't really thought seriously about it. When you go to contemplation, you start to think more seriously about something. When you get to preparation, that's when it's real. You're starting to plan on how are you going to do this? How am I going to make this change? What am I going to do? How's that going to work into my life? All of those things start to come into preparation. Then you take action. And then when you take action, you decide, is this something that I can do? And how do I maintain and sustain this behavior change? What tweaks do I need to make in my preparation and action plan? Relapse is almost always a part of behavior change. If you decide you're going to go to the gym 3 times a week for 30 minutes at a time, you may get up one day and decide you just aren't going to do that. And so maybe you miss a day or miss a week. But you always have the opportunity to come back into the continuum and start over, not necessarily from the very beginning, but maybe from the preparation stage, and make a few tweaks in your plan and start your action again. When social scientists offer behavior change tips, they will say things like be specific, tackle one goal at a time, be realistic. If you take on something too big, you may not be successful at it. Write it down. If you write it down, you make it real. Be good to yourself. If you sustain your change and you're doing a good job, well, you can give yourself some sort of a reward. And don't go it alone. If you have the opportunity to have an exercise buddy, if that's what you're doing, for example, do that. Even if you do it by yourself, maybe you tell somebody what you're doing so that you sort of feel accountable to somebody. Changing others, the behavior change process. Well, Dr. Everett Rogers, in his Diffusion of Innovation book, came up with several stages or steps in this process. They're similar to the stages of change model. They start with knowledge, followed by persuasion. You have to help people to understand what is the issue, what do you want them to change, and why. And you need to tell a compelling story here and make a great case for this, because if you do really well with the knowledge and persuasion phases of this process, they will make the decision to implement the change. And then once they implement the change, they will confirm to themselves whether that was something that they felt like they could do again and again. So it all starts with how you set it up in the knowledge and persuasion stages. All right, so the second part What we're going to talk about today is the social marketing process or behavior change process. So, social marketing is defined as an integrated marketing communication approach to promoting behavior change that benefits individuals or society. I'll get into a little bit more about what that means in a minute, but let's look at this graphic at the bottom. Don't forget to scoop the poop every stinking time. It's from the state of Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay. It's a fairly common type of social marketing message. It calls people to action, and it focuses on a very simple, singular type of action. So, integrated communication basically is combining communication approaches. You have advertising, public relations, existing mediums like utility bill stuffers, point of sale, that type of thing. And then there's community-based approaches, speeches, school presentations, display tabling at community events. You have the opportunity to mix those. And all that becomes what's called your media mix, which is picking the right mediums for your audience and for the change you're trying to promote. So in marketing, there's something called the 4Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. Social marketing is selling positive behaviors. So we use those same 4Ps. They just sometimes look a little bit different. If you use the scoop the poop graphic from a few slides ago, if you use that as your example, your product would be picking up after your pet when you go on a walk. Well, the price that, even if you have leftover bags laying around, it's not going to cost you anything financially, or even if it does, it may not be very much to get bags like that. But you do pay a price. In other terms, you have to remember to take the bag with you. You have to pick up after your pet. You have to carry that home, and you have to properly dispose of it. So you're paying a price, even if it's not a financial price. That's a big distinction in social marketing. The place is where you do it. So in this case, it would be whatever path you went on with your dog. And the promotion would be the methods you used to get the message out to people. Could be a billboard. It could be a social media ad. It could be a website ad. There's a magazine ad. It could be television. There's all types of ways to promote that message. So how is social marketing different? Well, the objective of social marketing, as we say, is to change social behaviors. But another big difference is the partnerships. In social marketing, oftentimes you don't have the kind of budget that corporate marketing has. If you don't have that budget, then you rely a lot of times on your partners. And also you rely on that media mix where you bring in those community-based approaches. So those will help make up for a lack of money that maybe Apple and Coca-Cola have that you don't have. Another difference is in seeking behavior changes, you're often changing values and attitudes to do so. And then a call to action is essential in social marketing. And I like this quote at the bottom: sell to their needs, not yours. So why is social marketing harder? Well, it is. And the reason why is that list right there. We're asking people to be uncomfortable, to try something new, risk rejection of failing, be embarrassed. Go out of your way to do something, spend more time, spend more money. Sometimes it takes one or more or all of those things in order to accomplish a behavior change for the good of society and the environment. And so that's hard to promote that, but it is doable. So I like to look at the social marketing process in 4 phases. Other people will have a different look, a different number of phases, whatever. But in my case, I like to look at the issue/problem, the audience, the campaign, and the evaluation. So let's dive in. So if you look at an issue like curbside recycling, there's a couple of things you're thinking about here. Is the behavior you're asking for people to do, and then what could you potentially do as a project sponsor, a government agency, nonprofit, whatever, to Get rid of any structural barriers that might be in the way, or at least some of the structural barriers that might be in the way of people being able to do it. When recycling used to mean going to a community recycling center, it was a lot harder. Well, it's still the same concept. You separate out things, certain things you can and certain things you can't recycle. But since communities have been doing curbside recycling, it's made it a lot easier. They've gotten rid of that structural barrier. You still may have to pay a little bit of money on your utility bill to have that service, but it's well worth it to most people to not have to pile all the recycling in their car and drive it somewhere to dump it off. So you have removed that structural barrier, and then you make sure that people understand what their part is. Here's what your action is. Now, in the phase two is all about audience. And the big thing to consider with your audience is, how are you going to target them? What market segment are you going to be looking at? Of course, you can do background research to figure that out. But sometimes the most important thing here, I think, is sometimes you have a segment within a segment. In fact, that's usually the case. So you want to get your audience down to the lowest common denominator. In the Salt Lake County Stormwater Coalition, Salt Lake County residents are our audience. The general public is one of our audiences. But you have very specific audiences within that, like dog owners or people who walk dogs, for that one best management practice of picking up after your pet. If the best management practice is recycling your used oil, well, you're looking at car owners who change their own oil. So it's a small subset of a larger audience. Research methods for your audience include the background or non-interactive methods. These are things that you could easily do, you and your partners, on your own, looking at census data, maps, geographic data. There's a variety of sources out there on the internet that could help you do some of the background information and research you need. Some of the more interactive methods are a little bit more technical and might want to be done by professionals, especially the interviews, focus groups, and surveys. You may want to have a professional company do those for you. And they become very, very important. And reason why is, look at what audience research will show you. The knowledge and awareness level that people have as a baseline going into your project, their attitudes and beliefs, the actions that they're currently taking, the barriers to changing those actions or behaviors, benefits that could encourage them to change, and then the messages that will help you achieve the goal. What those messages are, how to hone them in to really prompt people to take action. The third phase is the campaign itself, the implementation. And when we talk about implementation, we really like to look at barriers, benefits, and messages. So why do people resist change, and what would it take to get them to change? So there's a lot of different types of barriers. Physical barriers include, it's just too hard to do it, it's not safe, it takes too long. Economic barriers are added costs, no cost savings. Educational barriers, I don't know how to do it. And then these are the tough ones, the social or psychological barriers. Nobody else is doing it. I've never done it before. I tried it once and it didn't work, so why should I do it again? These are the more difficult barriers to overcome. If you want to overcome those barriers, you have to figure out, can I turn those barriers around 180 degrees? Can I point out the fact that a lot of other people, or maybe everybody else around you, is doing it? If you don't know how to do it, we'll teach you how to do it. You could actually save some time or money, etc. Or it's a very cool thing to do. If the Fresh Living hosts are doing it from KUTV's afternoon talk show, then I guess it's good enough for me. So now we look at benefits. There's real benefits and perceived benefits. Real benefits include save money, save time, protect your health. or your family's health, or the environment's health. Perceived benefits are fitting in with others, people expect it, everyone else is doing it. I'll get some sort of reward that may not be financial, but just recognition or whatever that is, some reason to want to do that. Message phrasing. So there's a lot of discussion about whether you should have positive messages or negative messages. I look at these and I think this is always comes down to what behavior are you trying to promote and who is your audience. A positive way of talking about trash could be always dispose of your trash in trash cans. A negative message is don't litter. Um, that becomes, like I say, a case by case basis. We used a positive message when we said pick up and throw away your trash, recycle glass and plastics. So campaign implementation in the media mix. Once again, it's really important to pick a variety of methods of getting your message out that will work for the message you're trying to promote and your audience. And community-based sources are really important, I think, when you're doing social marketing, because that usually is a little bit less money and you have that opportunity to have more face-to-face interaction a lot of times. Social media, websites are all very important as well in the mix. So choosing the right format. You want to ask yourself a lot of questions when you look at each format. What are the pros of doing this? What are the cons? What are the costs? And that could be a very big con in doing it. And more importantly, how well will I reach my audience if I use this format? And your audience research will help bear that out. So some of the behavior change tools that you use as part of your messaging are social norms. So this is the idea that other people are doing this. Other people like me, people that live on my street do this, so I should do it. Commitments. Commitments are the idea of I'm going to sign a pledge to, pick up trash on the trail, something like that. Prompts. Um, the sticker at the light switch to remind you to turn the lights off. The ding ding sound in your car when you forget to turn your lights off in the car. Those are prompts. Incentives or awards are recognition for what you're trying to do. They don't usually have to be financial. They could be some sort of a certificate, whatever that looks like. It's just people like to have a pat on the back occasionally. Vivid communication is just the idea of when you're telling your message, it's really important to use strong words and strong pictures. I don't mean necessarily shocking or anything inappropriate, but you just want to make sure that your words and your pictures very accurately communicate the message you're trying to get across. And then building motivation over time. You may use several different approaches. You'll potentially use your message several different times. It takes a while to get people to take action sometimes. Very rarely do they do it the first time you mention something. So now the evaluation phase, the fourth phase. When you're doing evaluation, you want to remember to begin with the end in mind. It's not necessarily a linear process, but you're always thinking in terms of the short-term, medium range, and long-range goals. So in evaluation, you want to map out your campaign. Use a logic model. A lot of times if you're asking for a federal grant, you have to provide a logic model. But even if it's not anything very elaborate, just some sort of a simple way of tracking those inputs, outputs, and outcomes is really important. And then you want to be sure that you're measuring the awareness and knowledge level, the individual actions, and the diffusion. So if you go back to your audience research, if you're starting with the baseline, if you learn what people know and what they're doing at the beginning, then you can really measure the change in that in your evaluation. And just a reminder of evaluation levels, they can be as basic as receiving the message, learning something, taking an individual action, or the diffusion where within your own sphere of influence or social system, you've made this action diffuse and other people are now taking it on. And then the last one is measurable social or environmental impact. If you can show that, you've really done a great job with your social marketing or behavior change campaign. So that's pretty much it for now for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Please take down my information and contact me if you have any questions at all. I love to share about this stuff.